Hi, we are live now. Very good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to all the speakers and participants in today's session that is organized by TechGeek on securing the future, exploring the frontiers of cybersecurity. So myself, Palvi, and I have been working as an event manager and alliance in TechGeek from last 6 months. Talking about TechGeek is a division of Times Internet and India's largest digital product company. We help our business partner realize their true talent and business potential using our specialized skill assessment, community engagement, and recruitment solutions. We are India's largest and growing developers community of 4.6 million software developers. So today we have with us the most eminent speakers from industry who are going to share their views on the most important topic in today's time, which is cybersecurity. Without any further delay, so we have with us Dr. Pawan Duggal. He is the Advocate, Supreme Court of India, Expert Authority in Cyber Law, Pawan Duggal Associates. And we have Sunil David, our moderator for today's session. He's a digital technology consultant, ex-regional director, IoT, AT&T. Kavita Srinivasulu. She is the global head of cyber risk and data privacy, BFSI, RNC, Tata Consultancy Services. Vikram Dhanar, CISO, Virtusa. Dr. Lupa Mudra, she is Certified Corporate Director, Institute of Directors. Philip Burgess is a Global Head Applied Intelligence, Platform Engineering and Architecture, DXC Technology. Kanish Kaur, he is a Founder and Chief Executive Officer, India Future Foundation. So before handing it over to Mr. David, I just would like to thank to all the speakers for joining us. So looking forward to the discussion. Over to you, Mr. David.
Yeah, thank you so much, Palvi, for that introduction, and good afternoon to all those who have joined the session virtually, and a warm welcome to all the esteemed panelists. The panel that we're going to deliberate on is on the topic of securing the future, exploring the frontiers of cybersecurity. I think a very apt and contextual topic to discuss. Before we get into the panel discussion, I want to take a few minutes to kind of set the context for the discussion. So friends, we are living in an increasingly interconnected world. Technology is kind of very deeply integrated into every aspect of our lives. And hence the need to protect our digital infrastructure, information, data has never been more critical now. And cybersecurity obviously has been a very, very pivotal concern because the threats that we face in cyberspace continue to evolve and they're growing in sophistication. And the cyber threats pose significant risks to individuals, businesses, and even nations, right? From data breaches and ransomware attacks to social engineering and IP theft. The repercussions of cyber attacks can be far-reaching and devastating. Now, as technology advances, so do the methods that are employed by cybercriminals. As I said, the attacks are getting a lot more sophisticated, and this requires a continuous exploration of new frontiers in cybersecurity. I want to share some very important pointers for you all. And this is not to scare you all, but just hear out these pointers. Cybersecurity Ventures, which does a lot of research in the space, they recently said that the global cost of cybercrime will touch 8 trillion in 2023. Now, that is equivalent to if you have a country, that will probably be the third largest GDP after US and China, 8 trillion, and they forecast that it might probably touch cybercrime and touch 10 trillion in 2025. Now, some of the past attacks that have happened, organizations that have been impacted, I think you'll have heard of it, Honda, Kia Motors, Colonial Pipeline, even countries have not been spared, right? Like Costa Rica was brought down to its knees when they had a ransomware attack a couple of years back. And even in this month alone, I just wanted to highlight some big attacks which have happened. A DDoS attack on the website of the Parliament in New Zealand just a few days back. Data was leaked from 34 million Indonesian passports. Last month, there was a cyber attack on a petroleum company in Canada. And in our own country, we had AIMS, All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi. They were hit by the second attack. And earlier this year, Sun Pharma had a ransomware attack, right? So much so that Sun Pharma had to come back and tell the investors and shareholders that there might probably be an impact to their performance in terms of revenue and profitability because of the cyber attack. And leaving aside companies, friends, we are seeing individuals being attacked, right? Just a few days back, I was reading about how Hyderabad police have unearthed a 712 crore investment fraud involving Chinese and Dubai operators. These were people trying to fool people by offering part-time trading jobs and all that stuff, right? So we are seeing sextortions happening very frequently, video calls coming from unknown people, from unknown numbers, people are getting trapped. So these are becoming very common now. I just wanted to also highlight some points which IBM and Poneman Research Institute came up with. They came up with this set of statistics, which I just want to share. Indian firms, they lost 176 million in data breaches in 21-22. The average dwell time of a breach, that is the time that the compromise remains undetected, can be as long as 277 days. And there was a report that came out recently from Indus Space, State of Application Security Report. It says that India has seen almost 500 million cyber attacks in the first quarter of 2023 that were all blocked, right? And just a couple of days back, I was just reading in the paper about a new ransomware virus called Akira. I don't know whether you have heard of it. It is stealing vital personal information and encrypting data, and that is leading to extortion of money, right? So, friends, the whole cyber landscape has changed a lot, right? And it calls for all of us to be very vigilant, right? From an organization standpoint as well as individually. I think what is very important is to follow what is called cyber hygiene. Just as you have personal hygiene, it's important to follow cyber hygiene. Now, during the course of this discussion, and we have a great set of leaders who would be sharing their perspectives, we broadly wanted to cover a few important themes. So one is, of course, we want to understand what is the current threat landscape, right? That's one. Secondly, we want to also discuss about the technology and innovation that is happening in this space, right? So, for example, the use of AI and machine learning, blockchain. So we can actually use these kind of tools to kind of mitigate cyber attacks. And the whole objective is trying to see how we can move from reactive to be able to predict cyber attacks. The third important theme is all about data protection and privacy. I think that's going to be important, and we're going to get here Kanish kind of elaborate a little bit more on that. We also want to talk about the whole aspect about collaboration and partnerships, because that is going to be very, very important, because organizations have to realize that managing their data, their assets, building the right security solutions and products, that's not perhaps their core competency. The need is for them to partner with solution providers, companies who have very good solutions. There are also a lot of good startups who are offering very good solutions. So the need to collaborate between industry and companies, and also within the country, the need for us to collaborate with other stakeholders, the need for us to collaborate very closely with government, industry bodies, and so on. And lastly, friends, the very important issue about cybersecurity skills gap, because India, the country, I think we have a big challenge when it comes to skills, right? There's a huge demand for people with cybersecurity skills, but I think there's a big shortage today of cybersecurity talent, right? So the question would come about, how are we going to manage that? Should we train people inside the organization? Should we hire from outside, right? So those are questions that organizations are grappling with. Now, having set this context, I now want to move to the panel, and I'm going to start with Vikram Danda. Vikram, thank you so much for taking time to join this panel. Vikram is the CISO of Virtusa. So Vikram, I just wanted to start by asking you, what is your view of the current cyber landscape and any specific trends that you would like to call out, especially from your industry, Vikram?
Well, let me say first this, that cyber security is one area where two opposite ends of the spectrum are coming together to drive us, the cyber defenders, in the same direction. One end is the government with all its regulations, the advisories which come out, certain doing its job and whatnot. The other end is very funny or very peculiar. They're the cyber criminals. So between these two, on one side there is compliance to comply with all that the government and its regulators want us to do, and on the other side are the cyber criminals, where we need to make sure that we have adequate security to deter them. But both of them are driving us in the same direction. I can't think of another domain in which the government and the cyber criminals are driving, government and the crooks are driving us in the same direction. Now, there's something very peculiar about the cyber criminals. They are smart. They're in many ways very smart. And in some ways, they're amongst the smartest of all people. I, truly speaking, have no idea how do they come up with these exploits? How do they find these weaknesses? And it's not a single weakness necessarily. It could be a set of weaknesses that they stitch together very nicely and use it to mount a very debilitating attack on the nation states or on governments or on, as you mentioned, even individuals and companies. So what is changing then in the recent past? Well, what is changing is one, that as we are moving from on-prem to cloud, and the cloud infrastructure, the cloud footprint is only increasing, the external attack surface that these attackers can take advantage of, that's been increasing. And you now don't have really a perimeter inside which you are safe. There is essentially no perimeter. So some people talk about identity being the new perimeter. Some people talk about the device being the new perimeter, right? So you have to really guard against far more than you had to do in the past. Right? Even take applications. We probably sometime back only talk about application security. It then became, say, API security. If you go towards the infrastructure side, container security is becoming big. Domains, subdomains, URLs, you name it. All of them are vulnerable. All of them have weaknesses, and we need to guard against it all. So if there's an overarching trend in all this, it is that you must be aware of your assets. You must be completely aware of your attack surface. And then, of course, merely being aware is not sufficient. You need to take action to ensure that the attack surface is safe. You're securing the attack surface to make sure that nothing can go wrong. Now, one of the things which people say very often is that it's humanly impossible to be, 100% perfect. But in the case of cybersecurity, at least as far as your external attack surface is concerned, that's what you need to be. You need to be close to 100%, if not 100%. Because this game of, if you can call it that, this game of cybersecurity is a very asymmetric game. The attackers need to succeed just once, whereas we have to be succeeding 100 times, 100%. Because when we fail once, it's almost game over. So that's it from my side, Sunil.
Right, Vikram, I think very valid points that you raised. So you talked about the fact that we cannot get to 100%, at least come close to it. But at the end of the day, it's all about trying to mitigate the risk, right? Because I don't think even with all the products and services that you might have the best cybersecurity professionals. So how do you minimize the risk, right? So, and that's where Vikram, from your organization standpoint, are you trying to take help from the external ecosystem to kind of help you, Vikram?
Yes, definitely. And I'll tell you how we are doing this. It's a very, I would say, a novel approach that we are taking. So I call this approach the no surprises approach. What I mean by this is that regardless of what happens, we should not be surprised by any finding. Nothing. So let's take a penetration test, right? Why should a pen tester be able to tell me something that I don't already know? I should know it. We are on the inside. We have administrator access to everything. So why should a pen tester be able to surprise me with a finding that I'm not already aware of? Okay, right. Now this could be utopia, the holy grail to try and achieve. But each time we are surprised, if we go back, do a root cause analysis regarding the reasons for the surprise. Was it that the technology was not in place, or the technology was in place but we were not using it appropriately, or it was in place being used appropriately but we were perhaps not listening to what it was telling us, or it had told us something, we had listened to it but we had not reacted in time to fix it. It could be any number of reasons, right? Or it could be a true surprise. But if you keep doing this root cause analysis and then take corrective action to fix the identified causes, you suddenly are on a road to improvement.
Right.
So this is one, no surprises. And it could be no surprise from a pen test, no surprise from a red team exercise, in our own internal audits, our own breach and attack simulation, no surprises. And the bet over here is that if you can avoid these small surprises, then in the long term, you will never have that nastiest of surprises, which is basically a successful breach.
Right.
Now on this, just to continue on this, say vulnerability management, it's something which bugs us all. How do we do proper vulnerability management? And once again, this thing comes in, we can't remediate it all. So what we have gone and done is we have a 5-step model for vulnerability management. So first step is hardening. Whatever gets added to the environment must be hardened. Hardened to CIA standards, NIST standards, DISA stick standards, doesn't matter. Vendor standards, preferably all of them should be hardened. Secondly, what we must do is we must have attack surface reduction. What does attack surface reduction mean? That anything that is existing and in use can continue, but anything that is not in use should be retired, blocked, disabled. So if it's a asset or a say application which is no longer used, a defunct application, please pull it down. If an IP is not being used, please remove it. There should be no DNS entry for that IP. Right? If there's a service which is not being used, disable it. If there's a port not being used, block it. If a protocol is not being used, again disable it. So this way, so only what is required should be existing, nothing else. Then the third thing comes to patching. If the patches are being released monthly, please patch monthly. If they're being released quarterly, 6 monthly, 6 monthly. But with one caveat. If they're being released 6 monthly, don't take 6 months to patch. Patch within a few weeks, 1 week, 2 weeks, max 3 weeks. Right? Once you've done these 3 processes of hardening, attack surface reduction, and patching, then comes the actual vulnerability scanning. And if these 3 processes have been done well enough, then the vulnerability scanner should show only exceptions, which should again be subjected to a root cause analysis as to why do they exist, then take corrective action, preventive action, and you're well on your journey to getting a very controllable number of open vulnerabilities.
Right. Okay, great. Thanks, Vikram. I think great points. Thanks so much for that. Let me move to Dr. Pavan Duggal. Mr. Duggal, thank you so much for taking time to join this panel. Honor to be having you. So I just wanted to ask you, today's current cyber laws and the regulatory frameworks that exist in India, do you think they are robust enough to handle the current cyber attacks that are constantly happening? What kind of legal recourse do individuals like me have when we are impacted? So any specific additional steps that the government of India should take to kind of make our legal and regulatory frameworks a lot more robust? Dr. Pavan?
Thank you for that question. I think one thing is very clear, which is that the existing legal frameworks are thoroughly inadequate to deal with the challenges of cyberspace. Why? Because we have to understand India doesn't have a dedicated cybersecurity law. We have a general cyber law, which is a 23-year-old legislation, which only got amended once in 2008. Yes, in 2008, we did come up with a legal definition of cybersecurity, but barring some cosmetic provisions on cybersecurity, we haven't really seen major cogent strategy going forward. The National Cybersecurity Policy of 2013 was also a good motherly statement to talk about. But because it was not implemented, it remained a mere paper tiger. For the last many years, we've been hearing that the government is coming up with a new national cybersecurity strategy, but the strategy is still not out. Meanwhile, every 11 seconds, one company in India becomes a victim of a ransomware attack. Meanwhile, the constant losses to cybercrime and cybersecurity breaches in India show that India is a leaking data economy, and therefore a lot requires to be done. The government is mindful of this, and that's why they came up with some parameters for cybersecurity under the IT Rules 2021, which came into effect on 25th of February 2021, including mandating all intermediaries to report cybersecurity breaches and provide assistance to investigation agencies on cybersecurity incidents. But it was primarily only on 28th of June 2022 where the government took a very cogent step of implementing the Information Technology Directions 2022, which now have mandated a new level of compliances vis-a-vis cybersecurity. So now, henceforth, as per these directions, which are applicable to any body corporate, to any governmental organization, to any stakeholder, that the moment they come to know of a cybersecurity breach, they are mandated to report this within 6 hours to the Indian Nodal Agency on Cybersecurity, being the Computer Emergency Response Team of India. And if you don't report within 6 hours, that actually becomes a crime, punishable with 1 year's imprisonment and fine. So for the first time, we are now beginning to see some cogent steps being taken, but even they are not being effectively implemented because still no prosecutions have begun for violations or contraventions of Section 70 B6 and B7 of the Information Technology Act. Having said that, I think the way we are currently going, we require far, far more than what we currently have. Yes, we are already talking of a Digital Personal Data Protection Bill 2023, which is slated before the Indian Parliament in the monsoon session. But again, the final draft is still not out. And we have to yet see what kind of specific focus on cybersecurity has the new data protection law in place. Further, we have to be mindful of the fact that India is right now on a very unique kind of a legislative movement forward. We are already contemplating a new Digital India Act, which is likely to replace the Information Technology Act 2000. We're also talking about a new legal framework on cybersecurity, but that's all works in the pipeline. It's works in progress. So till such time that does not come in, the every stakeholder in India has to realize that a majority of stakeholders in India qualify as intermediaries. And in the absence of a dedicated law on cybersecurity, the best that corporations and entities can do is to protect their back and their exposure to legal liability by complying and adhering with the parameters of cybersecurity given under the IT Rules 2021 and also the IT RSP Rules 2011. Every intermediary in the country, and that's almost 99% of corporations in India, have to have in place in terms of implementing and maintaining reasonable security practices and procedures. Now, that includes being compliant with the parameters of ISO 27001. But most of the companies are not yet following the place. Also, the approach is the Chalta Hai, the Indian Jugaad School of Management approach. That don't worry, we will do Jugaad, we will just manage things out. Without realizing that when you manage things, you're doing electronic forgery because you're creating forged electronic records, which becomes an offense punishable with 7 years imprisonment and fine under Section 468 of the Indian Penal Code. So the only focus has to be back on adopting cybersecurity as a way of life. A lot of work needs to be done. Unfortunately, the existing legal frameworks are not adequate. And now with the onslaught of generative artificial intelligence, and with more and more corporates using generative artificial intelligence like ChatGPT for a variety of corporate purposes, we're also now being seeing the use of ChatGPT for violating or for breaching the cybersecurity of networks. Already on the darknet, we have cybercrime as a service powered by artificial intelligence, which has become the de facto norm as far as the dark economy is concerned. So in this entire ecosystem, the law has to play a very, very cogent role. But for that, the onus has to be on the government that it comes up with appropriate parameters in this regard. I think India needs a lot of homework. We need to learn from what has been the experiences of other nations who have come up with dedicated cybersecurity laws, whether it's China, Vietnam, Singapore, or even Australia, and then come up with an Indian customized approach. We can't have a cut, copy, paste like what we've done under the GDPR regime and trying to get massively inspired with the same under the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill. The ground realities are different in India. In India, the concept of data as a valuable commodity does not exist. And consequently, it's more about capacity building. It's more about sensitization. And I think it's also more about putting up test cases. India lacks test cases, 1 or 2 test cases and some stringent action against some entities. And I think the broader message is going to go that India is no longer a cybercrime friendly jurisdiction, but it's a jurisdiction that's committed towards protecting and preserving cybersecurity. But till such time that does not happen, I think the onus on all corporates who qualify as intermediary is that they should take this benefit of the statutory exemption from legal liability under Section 79 of the IT Act and comply with the parameters of normal due diligence, as also due diligence pertaining specifically to cybersecurity and pertaining to implementing and maintaining ISO 27001 standards in their operations.
Right. Thanks, Dr. Pawan. I think one point that you talked about where organizations are supposed to report a breach within 6 hours, right? So many a time we find organizations are not even aware that they have been breached, right? So how do you, why would you want to penalize organizations when they don't even know that there's a threat inside, right? So isn't that being too harsh on organizations then?
See, I think it's not being harsh because they've not said 6 hours from the time of the incident. They basically defined 3 different categories. One is a cyber incident, second is a cyber security incident, and the third is a cyber security breach. But the way they have defined it is very, very broad to not just include a real incident or an event, but even a suspected event. But the 6-hour timeline kicks in once you come to have a legal knowledge of the same. Somebody notifying to you, that's not knowledge. Somebody notifies, it's at best only a claim. You'll investigate, and once you come to the conclusion, yes, it's a cyber incident, then within 6 hours of coming to know about it, you have to report. It's a bit harsh or stringent when I look at global standards, but then this is also now being completely given the go by Indian corporates. They're just not bothered. They want to, just not report because they don't know that reporting is going to get them any cogent benefit. Also, they somehow get a feeling that they're confident enough that they will be able to manipulate the processes. But somewhere down the line, I think once government starts getting more stricter in terms of implementing these IT directions, it could be a different ballgame. At the end of the day, we have to all realize that we are in an ecosystem where it's a big chain and we are all links of the chain. And the chain of cybersecurity is as strong as the weakest link. But in case if we are just going to find out indirect ways of jugaad, of trying to bypass existing legal frameworks, it could actually be in trouble because a lot of times we've begun to start seeing that our clients who got breached and who invariably choose not to report often find that their data lands up onto the darknet for sale. And once it comes to the darknet, it often comes to the attention of the governmental agencies and then begins a new process of trying to explain how your data reached up there and why you did not really go ahead and comply. But because the problem is your non-reporting within 6 hours is an offense, it directly impacts the top management because a company, you can't send them to jail. But clearly for the board of management, for the top CXO level people, you can always send them to jail. So the criminal liability exposure of the management is too high, apart from the reputational risk that is likely to be accompanied in the event such a matter is reported. So I think it has to be a new trend which has to primarily push the Indian corporates and enterprises towards complying more and more on these parameters of reporting. But please understand, it's not just mere reporting. People also need to get confidence that their reporting is itself not going to be leaked, or that reporting itself is not going to be used against the victim companies who become a victim of these kinds of cybersecurity breaches. I think there are a lot of loopholes in the IT Directions 2022, and those also need to be substantially strengthened in order to have a balancing, harmonious kind of a balance between the sovereign interests of the government on the one hand, and also protecting the corporate interests and the interests of enterprises for business purposes on the other.
Right, thanks, Dr. Pawan. You touched upon ChatGPT, so I'll come back to you a little later because I know that you've written a book on GPT-4 and law. You also recently spoke about metaverse and law, so I'll come back to you later to kind of talk to you about those two technologies. Let me move to Kanishk. So Kanishk, thank you for joining the panel, and I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on this whole personal data protection bill that is currently being debated in the parliament. We are hoping that eventually it will become an act. But we are kind of in a situation, Kanishk, we have wonderful digital public infrastructure, great public platforms that we're using, very good for delivery of digital services, made it far more easier now for consumers for accessing e-governance services. But that threat, that risk of data getting misused, data not being protected, not being secure, and we are hoping that the PDP would address some of that. So I just wanted to hear from you your opinion on the bill that currently is in whatever form it is there, and any areas that you feel that there are some concerns which perhaps needs to be addressed, Kanishk.
So thank you for that question. I think one of the key things which has come out is that there will be stronger penalties enforced up to 250 crores. So companies which are hosting data of users, they will have some skin in the game. So far, we have seen that once a company is breached, particularly when they are holding consumers' data, they have no liability today, and there is no penalty apart from few sectors where there are laws and norms. E-commerce, fintech, those have been major segments, even healthcare, where there have been loss of customer data. With the personal data protection bill coming into the picture, there will be penalties which are going to be there, and there is going to be a strong organization to monitor. So, right. So the way the user's data is processed, transmitted, and even shared with third parties, that is going to change. A lot of times, companies don't invest in cybersecurity, particularly in India, because there are no norms. Recently, we saw the certain guidelines coming in where you have to report breaches, right, within 4 hours. But very few companies have actually gone ahead and made those changes because they felt that they will hardly be penalized. That's one of the biggest concerns that we face. Forget even synchronizing with the servers of NIC or storing keys. Very, very little compliance. So, as Dr. Duggal has pointed out, you need a stronger law, and you don't need laws in by pieces saying this is one specific aspect of law where work needs to happen further. And most of the companies today require sufficient time. The time window has to be much more stringent to ensure there is greater amount of compliance, and it is not just say 2 months, 3 months. And then actual enforcement where there's a monitoring mechanism, regular reporting, and how companies are compliant to it. All of that needs to be defined more clearly. The right to be forgotten, aspects around child safety, the age of children, those needs to come out much better, because a lot of times there are users who are accessing data services who are less than 13-year-old. We know so many adolescents, we know so many children who are accessing Instagram accounts and they are less than 13-year-old, or they're accessing other social media platforms. So what kind of liability that comes on some of these platforms when they know that there are users who are lesser than the age group? That's there. What kind of mechanisms needs to be ensured that they are safeguarding the users? That's something which is need of the hour. Particularly on cyber incident response, I think more needs to happen. If you access the dark web and the deep web, you would see large amount of data of Indian companies, and a lot of time these companies are informed, but they continue to deny that they have been compromised or they have been hit, saying this data is outdated. Uh, this happened in say 2 years back. It happened pre-COVID era. We have changed it. There has to be much more stringent norms to see that they are responsible, even if a data breach happened. Let's just look at the case of Uber. The Uber CISO, was put behind bars for something which he did not disclose much earlier. That's the stage where this needs to move forward, and the personal data protection bill is setting a context. I hope it gets passed within the parliament within this session. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to move towards the Digital India Act, right? We've been debating this for last more than 5 years. This needs to change drastically for the benefit of this country, for the benefit of the users, and for companies to further invest not just in data protection or privacy, but also in cybersecurity. That's the need of the hour. Most of the cybersecurity and compliance activity today is driven because of companies working overseas. They're requiring to comply with overseas laws while still having offices in India. So the GDPR applies even if you're outside the EU. The California data protection law would apply even if you are a data processor processing data for a company which is there outside. Their GCCs, their captives. So the laws have to be created in a way that it's just not the physical boundaries. More and more companies will move to cloud. More and more companies will access data services which are completely going to be remote. Employees are going to be remote. So how do you enforce some of these laws is going to be critical.
Thanks for sharing that, Kanishk. And just wanted to, just coming back to the PDP, there is this concern about non-personal data, right? Non-personal data, which perhaps can get misused. Are we having adequate provisions to address that issue related to non-personal data, Kanishk, today?
So I don't think so. We have adequate controls right now on non-personal data, right? And the Minister Rajiv Chandrasekhar highlighted that we're going to look at that part with the Digital India Act. That's why the follow-up of the Digital India Act is very, very important, right? Because the government has a very different view on non-personal data, the way it should be handled, stored, who has the first right to non-personal data. Is it the state? Is it some of the companies? Right, that's which is a key aspect that needs to be debated within the parliament, and then the Digital India Act needs to come out.
Thanks, Kanish. Let me move to Robin Phillip. Welcome to the panel, Robin Phillip. Of late, you've been talking a lot about AI for cyber and cyber for AI, right? So can you share about this whole relevance of this whole topic? What are the advantages or risks that are associated when you look at AI adoption, which is increasing by the day amongst enterprises? Robin.
Thank you, Sunil. So for me personally, when we talk about cyber, digital, AI, and technology, today it has all become very personal, right? What are the aspects of our personal lives, or official, corporate, or even any aspect of our life? There is a bit of AI, there is a bit of digital, there is a bit of technology, and there's a bit of cloud, right? We started living in smart homes. We started living in, driving in smart cars, autonomous cars, and even AI is coming onto the road where roads are going to be smart, right? Healthcare industry in the US, especially the FDA, has given an approval for having digital pills. That means we are going to eat technology and AI as part of our pills, which can real-time diagnose the effectiveness of the pills, right? So FDA has already approved multiple similar aspects. So we are going to eat AI, right? So sleep, eat, and live in AI world. So here is where it is extremely important to understand why cyber is also important from that aspect, because a cyber criminal today are targeting a lot of AI-powered systems, and they are using AI to launch attacks, right? So both aspects are very, very important. Whether we know or not,
We're not able to hear you, Philip. We're not able to hear you.
There are about more than 30 plus areas in a smart car cyber criminals are targeting to attack, including the Wi-Fi, entertainment system, including the power brakes. Imagine a situation if somebody can take control of the smart car or autonomous car when we are driving, right, which is running on AI, right? But there's an infotainment system or the telematics or easy use of a smart car can be breached, right? Same way, in a smart home, we are living in a smart home where we have smart ACs, smart refrigerators, smart doors, right? People can hack into any of these areas and then lock us inside our own homes, or use any of our smart devices and gadgets to launch attack against us, not only against us, even to other targeted organizations, right? There were incidents that even CCTVs were hacked. Hundreds of thousands of CCTVs were hacked, and using those CCTVs, even large social media platforms were shut down using a DDoS attack, right? So that is the way I think it is evolving. Today, every business is a technology business. I can see even a pani puri seller is using technology to build this business, right? So whether it is an e-commerce platform, payment technology, or food delivery, right? So everything is happening in technology. We are living in a software-defined world. Is anybody can control that software, they can control everything, right? So not necessarily the businesses also, but also even any of the devices, right, including helicopters and planes. I personally concerned about a time where we may have similar incidents in the future, like September 11, where somebody has to physically hijack a plane and hit the Twin Tower. But today, people don't have to get into planes to hijack a plane and hit those kind of targets, right? So they can remotely control. Recently, there was a helicopter crash, and the the news that is reported that it is because of a software vulnerability patching issue, right? So that is where the world is moving. And even more dangerous, I mean, what is scary is that actually we are in the corporate, we are adopting AI at a very, very fast pace, very, very fast pace. There's a company called NetDragon, which is nearly a $10 billion company in China, who is appointing deputy CEO, who's a humanoid, which is nothing but an AI-powered human robot, right? Volvo has recently launched an interviewer, an HR manager, is nothing but an AI car taking the interview of a candidate, right? So imagine a CEO is getting breached, a humanoid CEO is getting breached. What kind of impact to that organization, especially when the organization is a $10 billion company, right? So that is one aspect of that. On the other side of this, the cyber criminals are using AI in a very, very big way, right? So very big way. Some of the examples how they use AI is actually they are using AI to do intelligent and automated vulnerability discovery, that they don't have to get into a system to identify weakness. They can launch AI-based bots which can go and swarm around and then get the vulnerabilities. They are launching self-learning swarm bots, and they are developing malicious botnets. And these botnets and malwares can be adaptive, right? Intelligently and adaptive. They'll be using this for crypto jacking. And on the other side, many of the AI systems today we are building, there are a lot of efforts going on in the dark forums where how do they really influence the whole AI systems by data poisoning and ML poisoning. Cyber criminals today use a lot of AI for deepfake development, right? And they will use deepfake on the virtual side. On the physical side, they will develop autonomous weapons and slaughter bots. So that is where cyber criminals are using AI in a very, very big way. But the question here is actually how do we really prepare for this, right? So in my personal experience, that whether it is an AI or cognitive architectures or even any of this upcoming full stack architectures, in my experience, what I see is actually most of the time, or at least 70-80% of the time, I personally seen that the cyber attack or breach is happening just because some basics and fundamentals are missing most of the time, right? So what we need to do is actually how do we ensure that basics and fundamentals are in place. Second thing is that it is not about a responsibility of a technology team or a cybersecurity team to secure the entire ecosystem. It is an ecosystem responsibility, right from the executive leadership to a receptionist to a security guard at the main gate. Everyone is responsible, right? And we need to have a zero trust mindset, right? And absolutely there has to be a secure first culture has to be developed, and it is not necessary to be developed only after certain age or a certain level of people. And I think personally it has to be right from the play school, right? So that is where I personally see that security has to be embedded in a shift left approach, and we need to have a very fine balance between convenience and security, right? So because we are adopting convenience at a very fast pace, and security always comes at the later stage, right? Even in AI based systems. So that is what it makes a lot of difference. As I think one of our panelists told, right, bad guys have to make it get one time right, and we have to make it right all the time, right? So this is where that shift left approach will help, especially in a software defined world, in an AI powered world. Anything we develop, whether it is connected systems, future living systems, or even a software, secure by design framework has to be adopted, and we need to ensure that defense in depth programs have to be implemented. I personally have 3 recommendations to organizations and leadership to look at from a security point of view. It has to be intelligent led security operations. We need to infuse intelligence in our operations very extensively to make a reactive response to a proactive defense. That's one of the things. Second, big concerns, what I am seeing, at least in my personal experience, is actually a lot of the security things are operating in silos. That needs to be consolidated and integrated. So an integrated security operation is extremely important. Third one, when everything is becoming AI based and intelligent and smart, and even when cyber criminals are using AI to a greater extent, I think security has to embed this analytics, AI, and automation in the security capability, which will be becoming like intelligent defense using autonomous security. I think these are the 3-4 areas which I personally see that which will help us to really improve our cyber resiliency on this smart digital and AI systems.
Right, thanks. So thanks, Robin. Great perspective. Just one point you talked about, which is having getting the fundamentals right. I think following the basics. I think it just reminds me of reading somewhere recently that many of the IoT devices that go and get deployed in the field, many times they don't change the default password, and that becomes the entry point for a hacker to really using that device as a gateway to go and make serious damage. So
I think, Sunil, if I can just make one example, especially on that point, right? In Florida, in one of the biggest casinos, right, cyber criminals breached a fish tank which had an IoT sensor, right? And through that sensor,
fish tank was in Las Vegas, and they were able to penetrate that because the temperature sensor was compromised.
Exactly. That's where we are living in. And then if that can happen in a fish tank in a casino, it can happen inside our own homes and in our corporates. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Let me move to Kavita. Kavita, are you on? Kavita from TCS. Kavita, are you on?
Yes, Sunil.
Okay, so Kavita, moving to you. So I just wanted to ask you about the whole cloud security piece, because we've seen cloud adoption increase significantly over the last few years, and it's always going to be that shared responsibility, right? So the onus is both on the cloud service provider as well as the enterprise who are having the applications on the cloud. So your views in terms of how do you organizations go about their whole cloud security strategy, Kavita?
First and foremost, thank you, Sunil. That's a good question. And I would like to thank the panelists and TechWeek for giving me this opportunity. And, as, we are covering various subjects across various domains in cybersecurity. Cloud computing or cloud security is one key area that has developed insignificantly during, this COVID period. If you take a small example of how it was before COVID and after COVID, the utilization has increased significantly. Nearly 70% of all existing organizations have made cloud computing as their BAU or their um, you know uh, their operations on a day-to-day basis for managing critical data and for making sure that even the remote users are able to work on their day-to-day critical deliverables. And this cloud specifically, we all or the organization specifically feel that if they are going to adapt to cloud, it's going to be completely taken care of by the cloud service providers, and there is no responsibilities that lies with the organization. And this myth has definitely been advantage for the predators or the hackers to hack the network, and the level of contingencies and the attacks that has increased on cloud has significantly increased in cloud compared to the on-prem applications. The reason behind it is whenever an organization is trying to adapt to this cloud technology, they fail to understand there is something very important to consider is the security fact, which is definitely one of the key factors which is missing in the cloud security or the cloud computing model, which is increasing these, the kind of vulnerabilities that we are seeing. When we are saying vulnerabilities, the challenges like the misconfigurations, or there is no proper control panel that is set or control access that is being enabled. There is no, proper visibility to the users who are going to work on that. They just adapt to the products and enable in their infrastructure, failing to understand what are the cloud bare minimum cloud security controls that needs to be enabled for the organizations to adapt to this technology. So what are the key technologies or key cybersecurity controls that needs to be enabled? There are five important considerations that has to be, that is mandatory for the organizations to consider when they are moving or adapting to cloud. First and foremost is ensuring the team who is going to work on this cloud platform are completely trained, and they are aware about what is the technology that they are adapting to before onboarding them into this cloud services. That is the first bare minimum that we should, the organization should adapt to. And second is a risk assessment. Whenever we are moving any applications to the cloud, we'll just take an example. In when we are going for a purchasing a set of fruits, for example, okay, to a market, we are buying 3-4 different types of fruits, and we are going to keep it in the same basket. If one of the fruit is spoiled or it is contingent, imagine if we are going to add one more fruit to it before even checking, without even understanding if all of them are all of them are ripe and they have no contingency in the fruits that we are buying. If we are not going to consider that and going to add on more fruits to that basket, it's going to affect the other fruits as well, and the all the fruits are going to be rotten or it's going to be spoiled. And the same example applies in cloud as well. When we are going to move any applications to the cloud, we'll have to ensure we do a due diligence, we do a risk assessment for the applications to ensure the applications are not vulnerable and they're highly protected before we onboard or before we move to the cloud atmosphere. So the risk assessment plays a very vital role when we are moving it to the cloud. And another key control that we need to look into and enable is the access controls. The cloud is so secured and the data that we are moving is so protected that the access that we are enabling should be completely based on the necessary controls. It has to be definitely zero trust is one which is we are traveling towards, which is recommended, but at least a bare minimum of privilege access control and multi-factor authentication. The various controls have to be applied whenever we are enabling access to the cloud computing specifically. And the fourth layer definitely being a complete incident response, because it's not that, as I told you, clouds are not more protected or they are not less vulnerable. We have to always ensure that the cloud also has an equivalent privilege and equal importance given by enabling a security control system which has a 24/7 monitoring also, as we have done for the servers in on-prem as well. So incident response plays a very key role to ensure the applications in the cloud is also protected and also being monitored on an ongoing basis. And enabling the process, people and technology alone is not important in cloud, but also how consistent are we, how resilient are we in adapting to cloud is also very important, for which business continuity plays a primary role. We'll have to ensure that when we have multiple clouds, there is different types of clouds, as we know, right? Be public, private or hybrid. We also have to have a redundant model which is resilient in nature, and when a primary server is down, how we are able to ensure there are deliverables without any contingencies. So these are some of the key factors that needs to be considered by the organizations to adapt to while they are traveling towards securing their applications in the cloud atmosphere. As per recent studies also, the global computing market is expected to reach $623 billion by 2023. As I said, as the organizations are moving towards adapting to cloud, where they are completely scalable and available during any contingencies, we also have to ensure that cybersecurity has given equal importance during that migration. So those are my views, Sunil, that I would like to share.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kavita. I think very good points. You talked about having the right people when you're doing cloud migration projects, the importance of making sure the right applications, they are architected well to move to cloud, no vulnerabilities in that, access controls, resilience. So very important points that you raised, Kavita. Thank you. Let me move to Dr. Lopa Mudra. And again, it's just talking about cloud security. Dr. Lopa, anything else that you wish to add from a cloud security standpoint? That's one. And my second part of the question is, what kind of skills that one would need today, cyber skills, because there's a demand for cyber skills. We're having a huge shortage. So if you can just address both these parts. One is from a cloud security perspective to add to what Kavita mentioned, and also on the skills area, Dr. Lopa.
Sure. Very interesting, Sunil. When we are talking about the cloud, today we are in a connected world, and a medical device embedded in the body, or a car, IoT device, or a wearable, or our bank application, or personal information we are exchanging day in, day out, actually somehow is going to connect with the cloud. So cloud security is a very, very important or critical for not only for the organization, for an individual also. Now, as Kavita mentioned, cloud strategy, right? But unfortunately, the adoption of cloud, most of the cases, very ad hoc or through a shadow IT regularization, or maybe, cost cutting initiative. But very importantly, cloud is a journey. It needs a very strategic level of mindset with proper skilled people. You need to have a strategy in place which is capable to address the security risks and privacy risks both. And it is very important where we should send this data. Look at that and what data we are going to send. So category of data which we are going to send to the cloud and associated risks, when we are looking at those areas, what kind of operational risks, regulatory risks, technology risks, reputational risks associated with that data set. Now, secondly, where that data is going. As a service, what organization is hiring? Cloud provider, it's a platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, or software as a service. That is also very important. In most of the cases, the biggest challenge organization face during this migration is they have an in-house control in place, and that applicable standard, everything is talking about the control, right? It's a very control driven area within on-prem kind of implementation. When we are moving to the cloud, the control replication is a big challenge because cloud is not your on-prem. So the beauty of that is most of the cases, if we just look at the cloud control matrix nowhere talks about the control. It's always talk about the control objective. And we need to look at the control objective. For example, if we look at simply one control, that is your authentication, right? Now, cloud control metrics say strong authentication, strong password management. That is outcome of control objective or goal of the control in accordingly implemented. So it is more than focusing towards a control. We need to focus on a control objective to see that that control objective achieved or not. Secondly, our very important thing is how you are going to handle this control, how you are going to continuously monitor them, how you are going to continuously boost them and maintain the sustainability. So shared security model is very important there. Well, see, shared security model, wherever you are actually going, it's part of your contractual procedure. And there are three areas. One area, your cloud provider very clearly mentioned that they are going to maintain the control and they are going to provide the report to you. Second area, they clearly mentioned that these are the control you need to maintain. Third area, same control partly maintained by the provider, partly maintained by the data owner or application owner, whoever actually taking service. So ones need to be very clear on these three aspects and maintain that. And some cases, you may look for a PCI compliance or ISO compliance, a cloud declare it, it's a ISO compliant or PCI compliant cloud, people are simply adopt that and think that they are also compliant with that. That is not the case, because some of the control which you need to maintain or firstly need to maintain, you need to get compliant for those control also. And together, both the side actually going to make you compliant. Also, I feel it is very important. Security is a basic need. Privacy is something, it's a wish of an individual, how much I'm going to declare publicly or within a group or something like that. So security cannot be compromised. So it is not only the compliance driven, we need to understand it is important to run our business up, run our regular activity and move forward. So we need to focus more on that. And same we need to replicate in the cloud. And very clearly, cloud is no more just a cost reduction or cost and cutting initiative. It is a cost effective initiative. So that is one thing. Yes, also, while we're adopting some control, just don't blindly adopt that from different standard, because all the standard, if you look at security standard, privacy standard, their controls are overlapped, the way it is designed. So identify what control your business require for the security purpose, what kind of compliance requirement is there, look at what regulatory requirement is related to, and then create your control set. If required, retire the unnecessary control and commission new controls. Some cases fine tune that. That is very important, and continuously monitor that. Now, when coming to your next question, what kind of skill set, right, required? Now, if we look at cybersecurity skills shortage presently, very significant and challenging. And it is not in India, across the world. I think by 2025, as per IS Square, 3.5 billion job globally going to be open, and they are continuously going to be kind of, in open state because of skill gap. Now, this skill gap is not only at root level or grassroots level, in every level. And what I feel, India, this is a risk for cyber field, and it's a very potential opportunity for India, because we can create a service and cater to the world, because 75% of all engineering graduate, or 70+% of our legal or graduate coming from the legal system is not going to immediately get the job on the same year. So they need to wait for a year plus. So we need to create a bridge to, ensure that we give a clear direction to the people in the academia, that testing, that is, most of the cases, the freshers are skilled with something like red teaming, hacking skill, all this. Apart from that, the majority of cyber skill is required in application security, architecture. There are something set of people required in the compliance. There are people required in the project management, but all them require a basic skill related to fundamental security skill. And then they need to develop that skill above. So basically, one need to look at about, on their basic qualification, what is their affinity towards the cyber. Everybody may not good in every aspect. So accordingly, take those skills. So there are sub-vertical under cyber. Broadly, if we look at core security operation, when we talk about the security operation itself, just not security operation centered, there are entire security operation going on. System hardening is one part, application security is there, cloud security is there, testing is there. So we need to look at that, how their skill set and their affinity match is, and accordingly they can move forward. Same way, people who are in the mid career, they also need to look at how they would like to take forward their career. What is their career goal? Are they going to be a subject matter expert and going to contribute, or they want to go and develop their career as an overall leader for a particular cyber security function of the organization? Or they may need to think about, are they going to skill up their skill on a particular area and head some service wings of some service company? So accordingly, they need to scale up based on what is their goal, because it is very important that, one should know what they are looking for as a short-term, mid-term, and long-term career goal, and according to scale up. Now, one of very important thing is that people are looking for certification. Yes, for structured learning, it is very important, and also your hands-on experience is very important. So when you are looking for a particular certificate, very carefully opt that certificate, because there are certain very popular certificate like CISM, CISA, CREX are very popular, and even I have observed that people with 1 year or 2 year experience go ahead and grab those certificate. But the challenge I have seen that when they actually try to apply for actual certificate, that is after passing out the exam, by the time this, that 5 years window for applying for that certificate is actually expired, because they are not able to get those domain experience mandated by the certification body. So very carefully opt that certificate wherever certificate mandate that you need to have a 5 years or 7 years experience, and also go through the domain and plan accordingly. So you are very clear that by when you need to take the exam and accordingly move forward to complete the certification. But there are certain technical management certificate which may not require that kind of thing. Those cases, you can align it with your career goal and accordingly move forward.
Lopa, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I had connectivity issues, but I'll have to stop you there because we need to move to questions. I lost connectivity for a few minutes, but I need to move on to the next round. I just wanted to take one question from the audience. There was one question which I can perhaps pose it to Dr. Pavan. Pavan, there was a question saying that because the current cyber laws are maybe not adequate enough, how do you handle cyber insurance today? Cyber insurance?
Well, cyber insurance today is a royal step baby of law. Why? Because the law has chosen to ignore the importance and the relevance of cyber insurance. The law has come up with various remedies, various kinds of fines, but then the law has still not stipulated that corporates can rely upon cyber insurance as an effective tool for mitigating their losses and also for potentially reducing their exposure to civil liability. Look, cyber insurance is still in a very nascent stage of development as far as India is concerned. And one of the main key reasons is that the appropriate enabling legal frameworks which stipulate the importance and the necessity of cyber insurance are currently missing. For example, the Information Technology Act 2000 and rules and regulations made thereunder are completely silent on the relevance of cyber insurance. Today, more and more Indian companies are bleeding thanks to these constant ransomware attacks and cybersecurity breaches. And now the tsunami of cyber litigations is just about beginning to get started. Recently, Air India got sued because it had lost about 45 lakh users' data, and some of the affected users have gone and sued for damages by way of compensation. At least once you start stipulating that cyber insurance could be yet another mechanism for you to demonstrate the exercise of due diligence, that could be a good starting point. Further, since companies invariably are not wanting to pay monies by way of compensation and damages, cyber insurance could be a good starting point for the purposes of providing effective remedies to affected parties. Of course, for that, companies will still have to absorb huge premiums for cyber insurances, but then the devil is in the detail. Companies must specifically read the terms and conditions of cyber insurance and see the specifically exclusionary clauses, because you think you are signing for a cyber insurance, but if you don't read the fine print, the chances are that most of the things that you thought would be covered under cyber insurance would invariably not be covered. But for cyber insurance to really grow in the country and to be regularly adopted, it requires a more legislative and legal thrust. Till such time it's going to be left to the discretion of companies, they will not resort to cyber insurance. But once it's mandated under law, then that will see a massive increase in not just the size of the cyber insurance ecosystem in the country, but also will ultimately start providing effective remedies to the affected persons in terms of grant of damages by way of compensation, which can appropriately be taken care of by cyber insurance covers.
Right. Thanks for that, Dr. Pawan. Just staying with you, Pawan, I just wanted to quickly touch upon two technologies. You've written about metaverse and law, and spoken about it, and even ChatGPT and law. I think you wrote a book. My concern is that I hope you don't have ChatGPT generating an output which gives a very nice phishing mail that hackers can use to fool people. So I just wanted your quick response in terms of how we can, given this paradigm where you're going to have metaverse, generative AI use cases are evolving, how does cyber play into this whole thing, Pawan? What kind of extra checks and balances that we need to take into consideration?
I think a number of legal considerations have to be kept in mind with the advent of new technologies like artificial intelligence, generative artificial intelligence, and metaverse. Unfortunately, the legal frameworks are very, very behind. But we have to be mindful that, look, while we are behind in India, we also have the intrinsic capacity to leapfrog. We can actually learn from a lot of other countries. Recently, the New York State has actually come up and implemented a new law, which has now sought to regulate the use of artificial intelligence in the employment sector, in the sense that they are requesting and mandating necessary audits of the artificial intelligence before that can be deployed for the purposes of detecting bias and discrimination. Similarly, recently, China has now come up with some draft regulations, which will come out very quickly in terms of implementation, where they are saying that for any generative artificial intelligence, you will have to get a pre-statutory audit in terms of auditing from the public interest standpoint before your technology can even be allowed to be made available to public at large. Similarly, on the metaverse, while recently there's the buzz about metaverse has slightly come down, but the advent of metaverse avatars are beginning to throw up new legal issues. The issues are, the avatars legal? Can they be made liable? Recently, one of our clients, female digital avatars, got digitally raped by male avatar on the metaverse. The client was livid, and the client wanted us to follow and prosecute for digital rape. My only problem is the law still does not recognize the concept of digital rape per se. So we had to go under the data tampering laws to get started with. But having said that, I think generative AI is also beginning to throw up large number of issues. These are issues primarily concerning the legality of artificial intelligence. Is artificial intelligence a legal entity? Can it be sued? Can it sue someone else? Can it be made liable for acts that it does? Recently, now I'm seeing a spate of new litigations which have been targeted against these companies, including OpenAI, for a variety of things that AI chatbots like ChatGPT are doing. Recently, ChatGPT got sued by a radio jockey because ChatGPT was giving defamatory content about the said radio jockey. Similarly, now two lawyers in the US have come to realize at their own peril that it's not safe to rely upon ChatGPT because of its constant habit of hallucinating data. They went ahead and got their written submissions, which they had to file in court, to be authored by ChatGPT. And ChatGPT in the said written submissions also relied upon certain American cases. The lawyers asked ChatGPT, are these cases authentic? To which there was an affirmative answer. So without thinking again, these guys just cut, copy, pasted and put this entire written arguments in the court. It's only later that the court has now realized that it's facing an unprecedented situation because none of the cases that were relied upon in the said written submissions or written arguments were at all true. They were fictitious, false, fabricated, and was a figment of imagination of ChatGPT. So when things like these are beginning to start happening, I think till such time legal frameworks come in, people will have to be more mature. I see so many of Indians going ahead and recklessly sharing all kinds of their personal data on ChatGPT without realizing that your personal data is ultimately also going to be fed into the ChatGPT database, and ultimately your privacy is going for a massive 6. So I think there's a need for more legal framework. Fortunately, a lot of work has begun to start happening. Last week, White House in the US actually was presiding over a ceremony where about 7 big AI giant companies have decided to put voluntary breaks and voluntary safeguards when they're going ahead and developing AI. But then the way the development and evolution of AI, specifically generative AI, is happening, the time has come that the law has to act in very quickly. Well, none of these big companies are listening because they are in an arms race to develop the next biggest model and the most powerful model of generative AI. That's why the call for a 6-month moratorium that's been actually made by the Future of Life Institute has fallen on deaf ears. But while this race is on, we have also to be mindful of one new thing. OpenAI has now begun its new experiments in what they call a super intelligence alignment, wherein they are themselves saying that we are now going to come up with the next level of super intelligence, which will far exceed human intelligence in the next 4 years. So I think the time for getting the legal frameworks in place is getting more and more constricted, and the onus will have to be more upon governments and also on the coders to come up with appropriate legal frameworks so as to ensure that we are able to get the best constructive utilization of the benefits of AI, and also ensure that the AI does not tend to get misused against human interest and against human existence in the coming times.
Right, thanks, Dr. Pawan. So even Facebook has now joined the bandwagon, right? They just launched a new competition to OpenAI and Google's Bard. Yeah, right. Let me move to Vikram. So Vikram, I just wanted to get your opinion. See, you spoke about 5 specific steps that you all are taking to kind of make sure that you're having the right security framework in place to protect your data assets and all that. I just wanted to get your opinion in terms of, given that you all are doing so much within your organization to make sure that you have the right checks and balances in place, do you see this as an opportunity for IT industry to really take those capabilities and now start taking it to your larger enterprise customers, Vikram, especially in the space of cyber? You're on the mute, Vikram.
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. So if you look at the what's happening with the IT industry currently, the hiring is the least in the last 3 years and things like that. I believe this is a temporary phase. I have a feeling that things will change very rapidly and on 2 counts. One, what you just mentioned, cybersecurity. I think it's a big opportunity for the Indian IT industry to take on cybersecurity, not just for themselves. They'll probably learn it for themselves, but then take it to the world. Yeah. Because the requirement for cybersecurity is not going to go away anytime soon. So that's one area. And second is in the area of generative AI. Much like what happened soon after COVID broke out, and everybody started going down this whole digital transformation road. Same thing is going to happen here. There is going to be a generative AI transformation road, and again, it's going to be Indian IT industry to the fore. Because one thing we do have in our favor is the sheer size of the industry, and whether we like it or not, you do require thinkers, you do require the innovators, but you also require the doers. And that's where we come in. We have basically now become like you have these full stack developers. We are a full spectrum IT industry now.
Oh, absolutely. Right. And I think generative AI will probably throw up a lot of opportunity. There are more than 60 startups working on trying to build use cases for it. We hear about the top SIs today wanting to work on specific use cases which they can take to customers. In fact, I was just reading yesterday, TCS apparently closed 38 customers in the US for Gen AI. Of course, very early days, but huge opportunity for both the top companies as well as the mid-tier IT companies, right?
Yeah, I would strongly recommend to anybody who's on this, who's attending this webinar, to start working in the area of generative AI and skilling themselves in that area, because the best people today only have 8 months lead on someone who's starting today. That's it. 8 months lead. Right. It's not too difficult to make up that.
Yeah. I hope all those are listening, and there's huge opportunity here for those folks. Let me move to Kanishk. Kanishk, you recently attended the G20 Security Summit. I think there were topics related to cybercrime, NFT, crypto, and all that were discussed. Any takeaways from that summit, Kanishk, especially in the area of NFT and cryptos, because we have a big challenge in India when it comes to NFT and crypto regulation as such.
Yes, I think what was discussed was that if some of these issues could be largely taken up at G20 level. The focus has been on creating digital public infrastructure, DPIs, but across those DPIs, there will be emerging technology platforms which will allow exchange of information, which will allow exchange of payments to happen. Now, what is going to be legit within G20, what is going to be outside the whole legit is highly debatable. So certain aspects which have been there have been on cryptocurrencies, non-fungible tokens, and what could be greater use of metaverse, blockchain, because a lot of times people misinterpret blockchain as just being focused on cryptocurrencies, whereas blockchain could have multiple use cases, which could be for managing your land records, it could be for managing your banking systems. We've seen in India, the Institute for Banking and Research Technology doing extensive work on it, but very few use cases have really developed, which could be replicated. As far as India is concerned, we've looked at UPI being one use case, which is we are trying to take to the rest of the world. But there are other use cases which could be created, co-created, and moved ahead, particularly with Aadhaar. Can there be application of blockchain for the whole Aadhaar ecosystem, because we are storing so much amount of PII, and that PII is vulnerable to cybersecurity, that's vulnerable to breaches. It is also, much more stringent in terms of expenses that has to be incurred. We've got large data centers. So can there be a simplified way of storing all of that through a blockchain-based principles? Those were some of the key things that have been there. So far India has been focusing much more on in terms of what it has to offer from its DPI stack, but could there be other areas where India could also take a learning? Those were some of the key things. As far as cybersecurity is concerned, there is no single treaty which the world follows. So can the world G20 powers collaboratively think about tackling issues of cybercrime? If one state is today using cyber criminals, using cyber warfare as a mechanism to target another country, what could be some of the norms that could be really looked in? Can there be protection? Can there be conventions or building safeguards or building more cyber peace? Today, cyber is not just a weapon of influence. It is also used in diplomatic channels. So cyber diplomacy, digital diplomacy is the new norm. Could there be conventions around this where cyber could be utilized as a method of influence? And already some of the developing countries are doing work around this, where they're trying to help other countries enhance their cyber power, cyber norm. We've seen it in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. US has been helping Ukraine enhance its cyber security, cyber defense capabilities. So can there be similar collaboration between some of the powers within G20 who are doing really well to counter some of the influence which has been extended? Those have been the larger debates which have come out. Particularly, we have seen cyber incident response and ransomware becoming global threats, and India signed that treaty which allowed 37 nations on countering ransomware. Can there be similar exchanges which could be there in terms of creating cybersecurity regulations and norms? That has been the larger debate.
Right. Thanks, Kanish, for that. Let me move to Kavita. Kavita, we don't have too many women today who are in the cyber security space. You and Dr. Lopa, perhaps some of the exceptions, but purely from a DNI perspective, what would be the messages that you would want to communicate to the women? Because we really need a lot more women. While in the tech industry, more than 40% are women, but within cyberspace we don't have. So, what would you advocate? What would be the skills that you would want to share with the skills that they need to acquire, women specifically, to really chart out a career in the cyberspace, Kavita?
Can I actually leave? I will call at 4:30.
Sure, Dr. Pan, you can. Pleasure having you. Thank you so much for your perspective. Kavita, are you there? It looks like she is. Yeah, yes, Kavita,
can
you there?
Hear me?
Yeah, please, yes.
Okay, so that's a good question, Sunil, and most required now, because in these days or in the recent past, we've seen that cybersecurity is really increasing in the industry, and we need more resources. As Ms. Lopa had rightly said, there is a shortage of resources. By 2025, there's definitely going to be a shortage, and it's globally accepted. And more than looking it from overall, if you see the ladies specifically in the cybersecurity platform, it is 1:10 or 2:10 maximum that we have. It's very less strength. And for building the same, first thing that we'll have to bring change is that change the mindset of this, both at an industry level as well as for the women. The women usually think that from the, studying in school, colleges, then becoming an engineer or a doctor and getting married and settling down. That's the usual mindset that they have. But that mindset have to change. They have to think that they have more robust risk management culture within women specifically, that they know to manage risk in a more effective manner. And we have to definitely engage them and to impart knowledge consistently for women to understand this diverse requirement, and build a risk-free working culture for them to adapt to this cybersecurity platform. And I'm sure industries are also taking that as a step or as a requirement to increase women employees also in this cybersecurity platform. And I believe the organizations across globe and India take further steps on increasing this women empowerment in the industries across. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much, Kavita. And the last question before we wrap up, Robin, to you, this whole aspect about autonomous security. So you spoke about autonomous vehicles, but autonomous security, I think that's perhaps the kind of holy grail. So your views on that, Robin?
Definitely, Sunil. That's evolving in the future of cyber defense, right? Which we call it as typically the cognitive security operations, right? The autonomous security. There are two aspects to this we need to look at. As I mentioned, right? Fundamentals and basics at an individual and at an organization level. Second, using these capabilities in improving the resilience, right? So today there are a lot of use cases bringing this cognitive security into the cyber defense operations or even the cyber resilience. One, lot of behavioral analytics based risk profiling is happening using this AI to predict what can go wrong, which can be attacked, right? Who are even the cyber criminals targeting what kind of system, how much risk we have, right? They are risk profile based proactive defense based on the AI systems, right? So that's one of the use cases. How do you use analytics and AI in the entire digital identity space based on the candidates or particular employees joining, moving between different organizations, and even after leaving, how their complete accesses, privileges, entitlements are completely analyzed, again based on a risk profiling based. So this is where you will be able to take proactive measures to enable that proactive defense, right? These are some of the key areas where you can use analytics and AI in the monitoring and detection of security threats and risk, identifying insiders, especially in their behaviors. Monitoring their behaviors to stop and prevent any insider threats. And you can also increase the resiliency of systems by risk profiling of the systems by itself, including proactive vulnerability remediation based on external threat intelligence correlation, as well as risk profiling based on the crown jewel impact, right? So there are multiple aspects like that which is evolving to enable that proactive defense using this analytics and AI. But when it is coming to individuals like this, it's because, as I mentioned, it's a shared responsibility. We all have equal responsibility at an individual level and at an organization level, right? When it is coming to at an individual level, we may not be able to adopt AI at scale at an individual capacity. This is where I have developed a simple 10 cyber commandments to improve our cyber resiliency at a personal level, right? If you have 30 seconds, I can just briefly talk about the 10 commandments as a bullet point, which is one, obviously we need to have strong passwords. These are basics, right? We need to have strong passwords and we need to change it regularly. Second, we all need to have multi-factor authentication in place. Third one, we need to have regular backup of our data, whether it is a mobile or a laptop or even in a cloud hosted system, right? So backup of the data. Zero trust. When I say zero trust means trust nothing, but verify and trust, right? So that means that we need to treat everything like a postcard, not like an envelope. We should not be opening anything and everything that is coming to us, right? Whether it's an app, whether it's an SMS, whether it's a call or an email link, right? So be very careful about that. Fifth one, regularly we need to update our systems and devices. Sixth one, Again, always have that zero trust in every aspect of not only with the technology but even with people, especially in the wake of this whole deep fake driven cyber threat and attacks, right? Seventh one, good browsing practices and avoiding suspicious downloads. Eighth one, smart enough to spot a phishing email or a call or a QR code or even a link or a request. Ninth one, very important, in the unfortunate event of a breach happens to us, even at our personal level, right? Do not be hesitate to take the required help of the experts, including the law enforcement, in case if you're getting breached. 10th one, the most important thing is continuous awareness. So these are the 10 cyber commands in which I will put it as most important basic things at an individual capacity level, and some of the things which I mentioned about the intelligence, security, and autonomous devices at a corporate level to help us to improve our cyber resiliency. It's a shared responsibility. Let us all work together to make it safer and better is what my recommendations are.
Thanks so much, Robin. Nice way to end the session by talking about the 10 cyber commands. All those who are listening, I hope you all have made a note of this, because we really need to gear ourselves, be a lot more vigilant. The cyber landscape is changing by the day. Threats are getting a lot more sophisticated. We'll get even more sophisticated going forward. So we really need to get our act together. Organizations, individuals, nations really have to kind of work to make sure that we are protected from all these threats. So thank you so much, Vikram, Kanishk, Dr. Lopa, Kavita, Robin, Dr. Pawan has left us, but great perspectives from all of you all. Thank you for also going beyond our time. We wanted to finish by 4:15, 4:20. It's almost 4:35 now, but great insights from all of you all. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Palvi and the Tech Gig team, part of Times Internet, for giving us all an opportunity to share our perspectives. Thank you very much. I hope it was useful to all the participants. I now hand it over back to Palvi. Palvi, over to you.
Thank you so much, Mr. David, and it's a great pleasure for all of us and TechGeek to get such an insightful thoughts from all the speakers. As Mr. Philip had also shared the 10 points which are very important for everybody. So thank you so much for all the speakers and participants for joining us today, and